When I was in my late teens and early 20s, I could not bear to watch movies or read books that I considered demeaning to women in any way. I evaluated everything I saw or read in terms of whether it expressed a positive image of women. I was a very PC feminist before the term existed, and by the measure of my current understanding, my critical rigidity followed from my inability to be responsible for my own feelings. In this context, being responsible would have meant that I let myself feel whatever discomfort, indignation, or disgust I experienced without allowing those feelings to determine my entire reaction to a given piece of work. In other words, it would have meant dealing with my feelings and what had caused them, rather than expecting the outside world to assuage them. Right after my first viewing of the movie Secretary, I felt like I wasn't supposed to like this movie that much. I thought it was one of the most romantic and sentimental tales ever. There was love, there was eroticism, there were humor and irony, but most importantly, there were two well-rounded characters with their own oddities, which weren't that odd to tell the truth. Secretary tells the story of Lee Holloway, a woman in her early, maybe mid-20s, who lands her first job as a secretary after having just been discharged from a psychiatric institution. Poor, vulnerable Lee starts working for an abusive lawyer who ends up manipulating her into a sadomasochistic relationship.
Edward Grey.
That is what some people might think this movie is about. When you read some opinions and articles about Secretary post-Me Too movement especially, you get dazzled by words like consent, manipulation, power imbalance, workplace harassment, and straight-up abuse. And for some time, I thought I had to feel the same way, and if I didn't, then I was a bad person, or worse, a bad feminist.
I sometimes worry that I wouldn't be such a feminist if I had bigger tits.
When Secretary came out in 2002, the reception was quite positive. Maggie Gyllenhaal, who plays the female lead, was amazed and even a bit disappointed that people didn't have much issues with the movie. Quote, "I was surprised by how little controversy there was and how I didn't really get a chance to fight for the movie like I hoped I was going to get. I thought this will be so fun. I'm going to get to fight against all these old-school feminists. I began to think that my entire college education was preparing me to defend the politics of this movie. But I never had to. It was very disappointing." End quote. I think the biggest problem some people might have with the movie comes from looking at the main character Lee as a victim. Her family is not ideal, pretty dysfunctional, her father drinks, and her mother is too overprotective and overbearing. Lee herself says that she prefers a mental hospital over her parents' house, but not only because her family is so unstable. Lee is in general scared of life due to its unpredictable nature. In the institution where she stayed, everything was simple. She knew what people expected of her, and she knew how her day was gonna go, what she was gonna do at any given time. Now she's thrown back into a very hectic environment, and you can tell that the mental facility hasn't given her and hasn't taught her the mechanisms and strategies she can use to cope with life complications. Lee is very awkward, anxious, and sensitive. She doesn't know how to assert her independence or maintain dominance over her own existence. On one hand, Lee wishes to be a proper adult and get out of her comfort zone. On the other hand, she craves stability and just wants to follow instructions and rules and perform repetitive mundane tasks, because this option is safer. That's why it's not surprising that after her release, Lee starts taking typing classes and eventually picks a simple secretarial position as her first ever job, despite being first drawn to an ad with an ironic title, "Be a Leader." But Lee is not a leader yet, not at the beginning of the story. Only when she meets and connects with Edward Grey, her boss, Lee's character and confidence start to blossom. And this is another point that deters some people from this movie. Wow, a woman gets saved by a man, by a hetero relationship, by love yet again. But why has the idea of becoming a better person not only for herself but for others become so controversial? Lee self-harms. She's been doing it since 7th grade, after she accidentally cut herself in the kitchen. This was the reason, or one of the reasons, why she was admitted to a mental hospital. This act is shown as a ritual. Lee keeps a box of various sharp tools in her room. There are also Q-tips and antiseptic. This box looks very girlish. It's covered with different glittery stickers like butterflies and ballerinas, and one of the tools she has is a pastel-colored ballerina figure with a pointy slipper. Lee also has a smaller pouch with similar tools that she sometimes carries to work. Since the movie explores S&M kind of relationship in which Lee takes a more submissive role, she finds out that she likes being tied up and spanked. I've seen people argue that Lee basically replaces one urge for another. It's not a secret that some people might derive pleasure from inflicting pain on oneself, or that it overlaps with their other kinks and fetishes. However, I don't believe it's applicable to Lee's case necessarily. She only does it when she's on the edge emotionally, stressed and overwhelmed. And even though she started doing it by accident, and maybe initially she liked the feeling of doing it, it eventually became an unhealthy coping mechanism for her against her dad. Every time you watch Lee do something to herself, it happens after she interacts with her dad, when she sees him drunk or aggressive, or when she just talks to him even.
Hello, Dad?
Moreover, Lee stops harming herself altogether after her conversation with Mr. Grey, because he instills this new sense of liberation in her. During a job interview, their first meeting, Mr. Grey immediately picks up on Lee's disposition, and that amazes her.
You're closed, tight. Wall.
He's the first person who sees right through her. He's the first to question and confront her nature. First, Mr. Grey notices the band-aids on Lee's legs. I mean, it's hard not to notice them when a person is in this position. But eventually, he witnesses Lee in full-on distress, and he doesn't expose her on the spot. He understands she's a delicate person. He brings up this subject later.
What's going on with the sewing kit and the band-aids?
Mr. Grey puts all of Lee's feelings into words and tells her that from now on, she will never harm herself again.
Is it that sometimes the pain inside has to come to the surface, and when you see evidence of the pain inside, you finally know you are really here?
And I know, all that therapy didn't help Lee, but here comes a random man who saves the day. Yeah, pretty much. Therapy is not the be-all and end-all. And I see nothing wrong with changing yourself or your life when you meet someone, romantic or not, doesn't matter. Or when something happens in your life and it gives you a new perspective on things. Your circumstances change and you change. Mr. Grey doesn't just order Lee to stop. He opens up a bit about himself too and proves that he understands her. I don't see his character as manipulative. Like, come on, look at him.
Hi.
Lee feels recognized and accepted. It's clear that nobody has ever tried to get to know her on that deeper level. During Lee's time with Mr. Grey, she transforms into a person who has always been inside her. For example, Mr. Grey reminds her that she's a grown woman and her mother doesn't need to pick her up from work every day.
Why are you here?
He also helps her find her true, more confident voice. Lee's mother has been infantilizing and babying her for a long time, and you can see the result of it in the way Lee behaves, talks, and even dresses. Her childish room filled with stuffed toys, her swimming armbands, her bright purple raincoat, and girly clips in her hair. I love the use of color in this movie and the style of the 70s. You're shown two completely different worlds. Lee's world is purple. She wears this color a lot, all different shades of it throughout the movie. Her parents' house is also all hues of pink and purple. It's compelling to see Lee's evolution as she steps into Mr. Grey's world. She becomes more elegant and sophisticated. I'm not gonna sit here and say that Mr. Grey is this perfect dream guy. He's not. He can be extremely harsh and rude.
The way you dress is disgusting.
He suffers from obsessive-compulsive perfectionism. Little things can drive him insane. He can't stand when Lee plays with her hair, taps her toe, sniffles, and sticks her tongue while she types. At the same time, he has his own quirks and tics. The way he anxiously exercises in his office or fixes his hair. All of this makes me believe that he just sees a part of himself in Lee, and this pisses him off. Mr. Grey does say that he is shy and he fights it all the time.
You're not shy. You're a lawyer.
His confidence is fake. His calm and collected nature is a facade. He's very jumpy and jittery, very anxious. I don't even know how people find his character hot and attractive. He's such a coward. There's a woman who keeps coming to his office trying to talk to him and make him sign the settlement, but he keeps avoiding her at all costs. Edward! You can guess that this is his ex-wife since he has a photo of her. So Mr. Grey avoids any conflict and confrontation, especially in his personal life. As a professional lawyer, he's not the best either, but his business is still alive, so I guess he's way better in this sphere of his life. Mr. Grey's world is painted with brown, green, and red hues. His color is definitely red. The walls in his office are red, he wears red neckties, and at one point he wears a bright red long sleeve. And of course, the most prominent thing is his red marker. Red markers for Mr. Grey are like sharp tools for Lee. There is a parallel between them. Lining up the markers is a ritual for Mr. Grey. As soon as he does it, he becomes more confident and direct, but also he turns into an annoying douchebag. During the whole movie, you witness two waves of this douchebagginess, and the first one is especially interesting. Lee is trying to live a normal life to the best of her abilities, so she agrees to go on a date with Peter, a guy she knew in high school. Peter seems to be a nice, caring guy despite being very socially awkward.
The babies!
He takes Lee out to a laundromat, and lo and behold, Mr. Gray decides to take his clothes to a cleaner. Same place, same time. He notices Lee and Peter and starts spying on them. As soon as they kiss, Mr. Gray averts his gaze and storms out. He gets into his car, takes his favorite red pen, and places it on a seat next to him. The next day, he acts like a completely different person and starts terrorizing Lee about her typing mistakes.
Look at it.
Maybe terrorizing is not the right word, because Lee did make those mistakes. But as Mr. Gray explains, he let go of all her other mistakes in the first few weeks because she was a newbie at the job. Which is a ridiculous excuse and shows that he is not a good supervisor. Clearly, he is jealous or envious about what he saw last night, and I think there can be two explanations. The first one is that Mr. Gray is envious of Lee because she on paper has a normal life. Mr. Gray is a mystery man. He lives a very isolated life. He doesn't have friends or family, his ex-wife is extremely mad and upset with him. He's very closed off and insecure, and basically he lives in shame because of his sexual likes and preferences. He's the type of person who believes he doesn't deserve love. To me, Mr. Gray and Lee are equals, they are very similar. So it's hard for Mr. Gray to see Lee have fun, connect with someone, and even kiss someone. This is something he thinks he's not capable of. And another explanation might be just romantic jealousy.
Did you have a date recently?
Yes.
Lee is not an ordinary secretary. She's ready to do everything and more. This is her first ever job and she's eager to please. Mr. Gray looks at Lee in awe when she jumps into a dumpster in search of the notes he accidentally threw away. So it's safe to assume that Mr. Gray starts developing certain feelings for Lee.
There's something about you.
Lee continues making mistakes, and this leads her into Mr. Gray's office, where she's told to bend over the desk and read her mistyped letter aloud. What follows might be quite controversial due to the topic of consent. Mr. Gray begins to spank Lee as she reads the letter over and over again. Even though Lee follows through with all Mr. Gray's commands and instructions and doesn't just leave his office after such a weird request, she definitely doesn't expect this whole spanking session to occur. So it's beyond doubt that it's non-consensual by textbook definition. And if it happened to someone else rather than Lee, the story might have ended not so positively. However, in this case, we're dealing with these specific characters and these specific circumstances. Moreover, even though we want consent to be this black and white thing, there are bound to be gray areas. This scene is pretty lengthy with a couple of pauses during which Mr. Gray evaluates Lee's reactions, and each time you can tell that Lee expects him to continue. You don't feel like she's scared or unsafe. And when everything is over, Lee touches Mr. Gray's finger with her pinky, expressing non-verbally that she's fine. Maggie Gyllenhaal really wanted this last part to be in the movie.
It occurred to me at the time, I was like, oh, well, that's consent. And I remember wanting to be sure that that was in the movie. Because otherwise, I mean, you have to know that she wants it.
After this incident, Lee and Mr. Gray begin their S&M roleplay right at work, all while Lee is dating Peter. Mr. Gray gives Lee's life structure, shape, and simplicity, which she wanted and was trying to find after a mental hospital. It's not the same overbearing dominance that is oozing from her mother. Now Lee's presented with a choice. Mr. Gray, on the contrary, encourages her independence. Lee allows Mr. Gray to tell her what she can eat and how much. She lets him put a saddle and head harness on her. She herself decides to wear a spreader bar on her wrists in the office. All of it is her choice. One of the most telling scenes is when Lee fantasizes about Mr. Gray while pleasuring herself. On her nightstand, you can now see a red marker and a mini version of an office table that probably reminds her of Mr. Gray's table. In her fantasy world, red and purple colors intersect. Lee imagines herself as one of the purple orchids Mr. Gray nurtures in his office. The most direct simile/metaphor you can ask for. Not only that, but in another scene, you notice that Mr. Gray keeps Lee's photo inside his office terrarium. Unfortunately for Lee, Mr. Gray soon starts distancing himself from their games, and as Lee says, treating her as a regular old secretary.
I have to work.
They were never exclusive to begin with, plus, I have to say it again, Lee is still with Peter. I keep saying that Mr. Gray and Lee are very alike. Both can't confront their own feelings and fears, none of them is making the first move, even though both of them clearly want to be together. They only communicate with each other through S&M roleplay.
I just wanted... I needed you.
So, since talking like normal people is super hard, Lee starts provoking Mr. Gray. She intentionally starts making typing mistakes. She puts one of her sexy photos in a picture frame and places it on his desk, along with a bouquet of roses. None of this works, and Lee becomes more desperate. She buys a white orchid to mimic Mr. Gray's office terrarium in her room, she tries spanking herself with a hairbrush in the bathroom, and ultimately she sleeps with Peter. It's funny to see how Lee expects Peter to read her mind and behave like Mr. Gray.
That's not what I meant.
This scene highlights Lee's lack of communication skills and her still a bit naive personality. One day, though, on her way to work, Lee notices a worm in the grass, and a brilliant idea pops up in her mind: to place this worm in Mr. Gray's business letter. And finally, after that, Mr. Gray calls Lee into his office.
Miss Holloway, come into my office.
Peter almost interrupts this sweet date, but Lee comes up with an excuse. This time, Lee expects to get the usual punishment, but instead, she gets ejaculated on. She's clearly stunned and confused at first. However, when she goes to the restroom to clean herself, she gets excited and ends up pleasuring herself in the stall. Mr. Gray, in contrast, feels disgusted with himself. He tears down all of Lee's framed mistyped letters that he, for some reason, hung on the walls of the hallway leading to his office. He also burns Lee's photo together with other Polaroids of his previous secretaries. Lee actually met one of these women the day she arrived for the interview. The woman with a paycheck in her mouth was crying as she was packing her belongings, and it's unclear if she was crying because Mr. Gray had been abusing her and she was finally free, or because her and Mr. Gray's relationship came to an end. Every viewer will see what they want to see. The guilt and self-loathing prompt Mr. Gray to type an apology letter for Lee. However, he quickly changes his mind, destroys the letter, and decides to follow his usual route and fire Lee. To make it even more painful, Mr. Gray decides to reenact Lee's job interview.
You're fired!
You're fired! Now, Lee, get out!
He also writes her a check for $780, more than he owed her. Lee tries to replicate her relationship with Mr. Gray by meeting other men who are into BDSM through newspaper advertising. And I have to say it again, she's still with Peter. Of course, Lee realizes that it's not about the sex and it's not about the kinks. It's not about this kind of lifestyle. It's about this specific person with whom she has this specific relationship. She wants Mr. Gray. This movie is not about BDSM representation to begin with. This is a story of two weirdos finding each other and realizing they're not weirdos. It's important to know that Lee doesn't come back to harming herself in any way during this time, and she actually helps her dad with his sobriety journey. Out of the blue, that's how Lee describes it, Peter decides to propose to her, and Lee says yes, because she doesn't know what else to say. Some might say that Mr. Gray is cruel and abusive. Well, Lee's on the same level as him. She is. And that's why they're a match. And I still like both of these characters. The way Lee has no regard for Peter's feelings is not cute. The way she waits for him and expects him to understand that she doesn't love him is vicious. To waste someone else's time like that and play with their feelings is evil. I feel very sorry for Peter as a character. So one day, when Lee is in Peter's house, trying on her wedding dress, she finally has an epiphany about what the hell she's doing. She runs away in her wedding gown and goes straight to Mr. Gray's office. There, she declares her love for him. And Mr. Gray obviously cannot fathom how anyone can love the monster that he is.
We can't do this 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Why not?
But Lee didn't come to play. She's willing to prove her love. Mr. Gray tells her to sit in his chair without moving her hands or feet until he comes back. He then starts spying on her through the window. Mr. Gray also calls and notifies Peter about Lee's whereabouts, further testing Lee or maybe hoping Peter will change her mind. When Peter comes, he's very confused. He doesn't understand what's going on.
Something sexual.
He even attempts to unglue Lee from the table, all while Mr. Gray watches from afar, being in complete shock by Lee's determination.
Lee, I'm very fond of you as well.
This time, Lee finally has the guts to tell Peter that she doesn't want him.
Get out.
What happens next is, in my opinion, what Lee thought would happen if people found out about what she was doing. All these different people from different walks of life start coming into the office to talk to her. She even draws the attention of the media, which interviews her and writes an article about her hunger strike, as they call it. I understand that Secretary is a dark comedy and not everything is logical, and this story is pretty much a fairy tale, but I've always felt like in this scene, Lee is hallucinating all of these interactions. These are just thoughts running through her mind as she sits in the office alone waiting for Mr. Gray to return. For example, her dad comes to read this very impactful quote that says, "You're the child of God's holy gift of life. You come from me, but you're not me. Your soul and your body are your own, and yours to do with as you wish." He basically gives her permission to finally move on, to not be attached to him anymore. She should live her life without worrying about him. Lee really wanted to hear it directly from her father.
Thank you, Daddy.
Nonetheless, the best character who visits Lee is a feminist who brings her a stack of books to read.
Why don't you read about women's struggle first?
I love this movie so much because it's so self-aware and all the jokes land so well. I think I'm getting tired of looking at movies and stories as man bad, woman good. It's so insulting to me when women are viewed as victims. Because every time people don't agree with a woman's decision, they come up with the reasons for her behavior, essentially depriving her of agency.
Submissive.
Take Lee. You can construct a whole other narrative for her and say, well, Lee is very vulnerable and unstable, she just got out of the institution, so she shouldn't jump into relationships, she should heal, and her being into the whole S&M roleplay is just her way of processing her trauma, and she actually doesn't like it. How about a woman does a thing because she just simply wants to. And if something goes wrong, she's gonna face the consequences of her own actions and maybe learn something new. I'm sure some might still look at Lee and say that she's being used and manipulated, that this is some male fantasy and this movie is sending a wrong message about something. I mean, it's fair, it's your opinion, nobody's gonna take it from you. I don't think Secretary is like that at all. I would expect adults to not view movies as education on something. I also cannot imagine watching movies where all the characters are good and they always make the right decisions. Who would watch that? Secretary actually plays it pretty safe. There is a scene when Peter asks Lee why she's sitting like this, why she isn't moving her hands, and she replies,
Because I don't want to.
Lee submits to Mr. Grey because she can, because it's her choice. This is love for her, and who's to say that she's wrong? There are no victims in the story. Except maybe Peter. When Mr. Grey finally returns to the office, he picks Lee up in his arms and carries her to a room upstairs, where he keeps all of his garden tools. He gives her a bath and takes an interest in her scars. Both of them finally open up to each other, and for the first time in her life, as Lee says, she feels beautiful, finally part of the earth. The song that plays as Lee and Mr. Grey make love is so fitting and so romantic, it's like Lee's character wrote it. The line that keeps repeating is, "'Cause I love him." It's such a simple reason if you want one. At the very last, Lee and Mr. Grey get married, and you get a glimpse into their home life. The only thing that changed is the fact that Lee is not a secretary anymore, but she still enjoys teasing Mr. Grey. The movie ends with Lee breaking the fourth wall. She confidently stares at the viewer like she's daring them to judge her. Secretary is not an original story. The movie was inspired by a short story written by Mary Gaitskill for her book Bad Behavior. Her story is, I don't want to say darker, but it's more intricate and challenging from the ethical perspective maybe. I want to read Mary's own explanation of her story so you get an idea. This was taken from one of the interviews with her where she was asked this question. Do you think dignity has much to do with being able to consciously choose what one does? Yeah, I think that's certainly part of dignity. There is a character in the story, Secretary, who behaves in a somewhat degraded manner. She's told to bend over the desk and she's spanked, and she had a mixed reaction to it. On one hand, she's very excited. On the other hand, she's really humiliated and shocked. What gives the character a certain dignity is that she's called by a reporter after she's quit that job, and he wants to write an expose on her boss because he's running for public office. And she just hangs up. She's young, in my mind no older than 18, and she doesn't know why she doesn't want to cooperate. Some people would feel, he made me do this and my self-esteem was so low and I couldn't say no. But in my mind, she chooses not to testify against him because she feels on some level that she was part of it. This understanding is intuitive. It's not in her head, but I think on some gut level she understands that what happened was as much her choice as his. To me, that's dignity. So as you can tell, a very different tone. The focus of the story is on a completely different subject. Gaitskill had described the film as the pretty woman version, heavy on the charm and a little too nice. She said, quote, "It's not what I would have done, but it's kind of sweet. My actual character in the story, Debbie, she would have loved it. It was too cute and ham-fisted. Too wanting to create a positive image. It wanted to make people feel good about themselves. It was so odd, because I read an interview with the screenwriter who was sort of blathering about political correctness and how awful it was. Well, the movie is the epitome of political correctness. It was a positive statement about people who are into S&M and those who don't understand, which I find icky. But bottom line, it's great to have a movie of your work no matter what. It's a no-lose situation." End quote. I personally really like both the written version and the movie version because the stories have created two very unique female characters who present a completely different perspective on a very sensitive topic that many people are afraid to talk about.
Do you really want to be my secretary?
Yes, I do.